Welcome to the podcast. Today we have Neil Davidson on. He is a revolutionary designer who's been working hard in Brisbane for many years to elevate the level of designers to the next level so that we are competitive on a global scale. He works to constantly evolve his designs and to bring about true change in the industry. I hope you enjoy the podcast, and if you'd like to reach out to find Neil, you can find his link in the description. Enjoy. Would you like to start by introducing yourself and maybe speak to your background as an industrial designer?
Yeah, thanks, Roman. Thanks for having me on. So I am Neil Davidson. I'm the design director and founder of Clandestine Design Group. We're obviously a Brisbane-based industrial design team. We work both, I guess, locally, nationally, and internationally. Our clients can range from mum and dad inventors through to large corporates and multinationals, which is an interesting portfolio mix of clients, but it's in the mix where the interest comes, I guess, for a lot of the team here. And it's been interesting over the last few years, and we can dig into this a bit later, how COVID has changed the portfolio mix of consultants and how that's created a real shift in, I guess, our working style and our working, characteristics.
Yeah, COVID's had a pretty significant change on many different fields, but yeah, it's interesting. So to start off with, what inspired you to pursue industrial design?
Well, it's I've actually got to thank my year 10 graphics teacher, would you believe? I never dug into it as to how he knew about industrial design. So I grew up in the country. I was fortunate enough to live on the land, and I was third generation or fourth generation farming stock, I guess. And I went to a school that offered, graphics and shop A, shop B, and those sort of things. So I guess a combination of my father's influence on the farm, always, building and engineering and fixing things. Particularly, Dad had a mentality that when something broke, he didn't just buy the same replacement part to repair it. He'd always go to the level of engineering a better solution for it. So what I mean by that is, if we had a plow and a component on the plow would break, Dad knew that he didn't abuse the machinery. He just knew the machinery was flawed. So he'd go to the effort of going to a local engineering shop in Warwick or one of the Darling Downs centres and sitting down with those mechanical engineers and actually re-engineering a casting or adding additional strength or structure to it, which I found fascinating as a kid. And I guess that set me on that engineering-led thought process. And then it was, as I said, going forward to the start of that session, the graphics teacher. So he always got irritated with me when I was drafting parts and graphics and always changing the design and making them better, and in my mind anyway. And he said to me, look, have you picked your subjects for year 11 and 12 yet? And I said, no. He said, I think you should consider as a career industrial design. And back then, so we're talking like 1990 something, I don't want to say, give my age away, but he basically applied for all these VHS tapes and this printed material from QCAT. And he had it back to me before I took my year 10 holidays. And I watched that diligently, and I saw these videos, and I was like, wow, that's me. That's what I want to do. So I was very fortunate. So I set up year 11 and 12 with subjects that kind of were almost prerequisites for industrial design. I did tech studies and maths B, art, graphics. I don't know if you guys had technology studies when you went through, but it's basically like junior industrial design. Physics, and that kind of just led me straight into tertiary.
I mean, I feel like that's a lot of the designers got into it. I'm the same. I did graphics at school, and it gave me the taste for that as a career. I didn't even know that product design or industrial design was a thing back then, and my teacher didn't lead me in that way. But when I looked back on the things I enjoyed in school the most, it was always graphics. So when I thought about career, I was like, well, what did I enjoy the most? Go down that path. So yeah, I think that shows the benefit. Like, so many people start their career off with a graphics class. They're like, maybe so many designers wouldn't be getting into it if they didn't have that class.
Yeah, no, totally. So, I guess a combination of my history and my family background. So I was destined to head down to, I think I was actually accepted into, it was RMIT at the time. And we had a drought in the late 90s that was a pretty horrific drought in the Darling Downs. And Dad sort of said to me, where did you get into? And this was really late. It was like February or end of January, and I think we were about to start uni back then, in sort of end of February, early March. And he said to me, where did you successfully get enrolled into? And I was like, I was Melbourne. And he's like, well, did you also apply for Queensland? I said, yeah, I did. So, fate has it that I ended up switching, so I could basically be home in Brisbane and then travel, the couple of hours every weekend and help him on the farm and do stuff there. So, which I haven't regretted at all, because, QT and the Queensland education and the ecosystem that we have here for industrial design has been, the best place for me to be.
You study at QIT or QUT?
No, so it was QT. So I went through from 1998 to 2001. I graduated in 2001. So it was, back then it was a 3+1 degree. So we had a bachelor, we were under the engineering, School of Engineering. So it was a Bachelor of Built Environment with the 3-year, primary degree. And then we went on and did a graduate diploma of industrial design as our thesis year.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Just to give us a background into the way you design, can you walk us through the process, research, concept development, or final execution that leads towards your final product, and the process you like to follow?
So it depends on, as consultants, obviously, we've got to balance multiple stakeholders and inputs, right? So we've got obviously the end user in mind, and then we've got our customer, which is obviously our clients, and then their customers to consider. And the design flow or the design process we use often gets adapted and modified depending on the client, customer, market matrix, if that makes sense. So if you've got an entrepreneur, right? So they've been a user and a consumer in a particular market space, and they've decided to step across that threshold, that business to consumer threshold, and they've become a business founder, and they're going to create a business that's solving a tension point for them. There could be a plumber that's decided to build a new type of wrench that solves how, for 20 years they've struggled with fitting a particular type of toilet to a wall or something, and they've developed a new invention, and they'll come to us to help convert that invention to an innovation. And they're an SME, they're literally a startup. So you can imagine, for that engagement, we are trying to be really lean in terms of our delivery of that product to market. And what I find often with startups and entrepreneurs is their innovation strategy is always on point. They just don't know how to execute it to market. But if you flip that and you say, well, let's look at a tier 1 multinational company, they have lost a lot of connection with their end users. They aren't being particularly innovative in the way they're building their briefs, and they've kind of rested back into this state of the fast follower, as we call it, and they're very iterative in their innovation technique. And a lot of their insights are so big that the C-suite is so far away from the end customers that their insights to their strategic decisions are coming through a sales and marketing channel, which is a very reactive and passive channel. So you can imagine when we engage with a large corporate, and we get in, and I always work my way up to the C-suite to have these conversations. So we're at CEO to creative director level. It's very easy for me to say, well, did you found this company? I was like, oh no, I've only been here for 2 years. Oh, what company did you come from? Oh, I was in batteries. I wasn't in plumbing, I was in batteries. Oh, right, so you have no real content knowledge in this sector. No, I don't, I'm just relying on the people below me. And then you talk to their managers, and their managers in this big corporate are quite transient. They've been there for 5 years, and there's no actual decision-making staff, because those big corporates are so transient in their employment nature, that they've lost that latent and tacit knowledge of the sector. So I'm answering this a long way around, but so if we're looking for a big corporate, then CDG is a strategic to tactical design consultancy. And what I mean by that is we'll go out and do qualitative research, ethnographic research. We'll get new insights from market. We'll translate those insights to strategic innovation proposals. We'll work with business analysts inside the organizations to work out which of those strategic innovations may actually be applicable to their portfolio and their growth agenda. And then out of that, we'll spin out briefs. And those briefs may not be industrial design briefs. Hopefully there's 1 or 2 in there for us to actually help them with. But I've done many strategic engagements with corporates where we haven't resulted in actual tactical work. And then, hopefully there's a brief that we can help them with, and then we take off our strategic hat and we put on our tactical hat, and we get to the business of actually, designing the product for market and taking it all the way through concept design, the traditional industrial design stages, that our housing and forefathers set up for us, but basically going through the 5 stages of development out to mass manufacturing and production readiness. So that's the big strategic scope. But if we're working if I go back to the start of the story, the entrepreneurial plumber, founder, startup manufacturer with his wrench, we'd probably be very tactical, and we'd be working out how do we quick them as quickly as possible to market, as lean as we can. So that might mean, obviously no sentiment testing and no ethnographic research, or very limited if we're doing it. We're trying to get using his mates, or other plumbers, to do a really lean focus group, as opposed to doing a big omnibus style engagement you do for a corporate.
Okay.
And getting them in the market as long as we can. So the spectrum kind of changes. The amount of scope we take on changes for the type of client that we're working with.
It does seem like that's a bit of a trend with corporate companies, is they're starting to take on more designers to not even necessarily design things, but kind of use the design mind to help them make better decisions within the organization. Like that might be like maybe it already is, I suppose, system design kind of encompasses that to some degree, but in the future maybe designers will become more integral in the high up level of corporate companies, because like corporate people aren't always the best at making good design decisions. Yeah.
No, that's right. And I think I think there's the design thinking movement has a double-edged blade, or it's got a positive and a negative effect in terms of what's happened. It's woken up a whole executive group of business leaders to the concept of design and the value of design, and that's good, because if I think back to when I started this career professionally and when I graduated and was working, it was and I'd love to tell you a little bit about that I guess back 20 years ago, but for my old boss Craig, who was a world-class designer coming from another part of the world and engaging in the Australian market, it was very immature around its design usage, right? So it was a really hard sell for him to engage and prove the value of design. And now I think about the transitions that's occurred at a corporate level through the efforts of IDEO and Prog and those sort of Stanford and Fastco and all those kind of channels. We're starting to have I can get myself up to the C-suite and I can have a meaningful conversation. I do feel that I have to unwind a lot of the briefs and a lot of the strategy that's occurring, because they've all had a design thinking workshop and they think they've solved the problem, but they haven't actually gone out and done the qualitative research and the actual strategic design work that needs to be done. But at least we're up there. Yay! At least we're up there having a conversation to actually sort of correct and steer the ship in the right direction.
Yeah. The value of design seems to really have accentuated into the public domain in the past few years.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're a young guy, and I'm sure you've traveled and will travel more. But Australia, in terms of the manufacturing sector of Australia, it's pretty young, and the utilization of those companies in Australia using design is very few. And you go back to Europe, for example, where there's companies that are 400 years old and have been using using craftsmen and then using industrial designers when we obviously matured into that state of being for a very long time. And I can always laugh when I travel through Germany and you meet someone in a restaurant or a cafe, and here you have to go into great depth explaining that an industrial designer does not design sheds. We are what we are, but in say Germany, like, oh yeah, my brother-in-law is an industrial designer. Totally understand what you're doing. So it's a very different exposure rate, I guess, or
even like specialization. There's so much more specialization over there, whereas here you've got to be very much a generalist, kind of like yourself. It's a lot harder to be a specialized in a very specific field here, because there just isn't the work for it.
Well, there's only 25 million people, right? And and when that awkward size where we're big enough to be lazy and we're isolated enough that we're protected. So when you think about corporates in Australia, there's enough capacity for them to be averagely good and sustainable off the Australian sector, off the Australian market. And it's the dollar's weak, the distance is hard, so they're not getting smashed by world-class design-led international companies
Mm.
as they normally would be if they were in mainland Europe or in the US, right? But you look across the ditch to our Kiwi friends, and 4.5 or 5, I don't know what they're up to now in terms of population, but that's not enough to sustain yourself as a corporate or any company. If you're a startup in New Zealand, you are not looking at a national market.
Mm.
You're looking at an international market. And if you're going to be an international company, you have to be world's best.
Mm.
So that forces the New Zealanders to bring design on early and immediately, and importantly, really value it. So when you see startups that come out of the New Zealand ecosystem, very early on, there's design being represented and being part of that core team because they need to be differentiated. They need to lead their category, otherwise they won't survive.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's a really interesting insight around. I mean, I've spent a fair bit of time either being mentored by or working in or educated and schooled by the Gandalfs of the design scene, and many of those great wizards, Kiwi brand designers and industrial designers and service designers.
Yeah. What do you see are the biggest challenges as an industrial designer, and how do you work to overcome
them? Well, I mean, it's interesting. Industrial design is fundamentally a creative pursuit, and you're trying to solve problems, and you work in a consultancy. It's an in-house perspective, and there's a designer maker perspective, and then there's a consultancy perspective. For us, we push as hard as we can until and often through and out the other side of the budget buffer to the point where we're in the red, to try and solve these problems and make sure that every stakeholder input and influencer along the supply chain and the value chain is being looked after. And then make sure the life cycle of the product is sustainable and sensible, and then try and deliver it all on market, on time, at the right price point. It's incredibly challenging profession, and there's so many spinning plates, so many constraints and inputs that you're putting and working through. So, I mean, the nature of the business itself, I'm saying, is the number one challenge, and that's the second one is you're often creating stuff that's never existed before, and when you're working with clients that have been mature R&D clients, they've gone through this many times, then they get it. They understand this is part of the process. But if you're working for a whole bunch of startups that are maybe self-funding or bootstrapping, and prototype 1 only works at 80%, and prototype 2 works at 85%, and prototype 3 works at 95%, at that point in time, they're pretty stressed, right? Because they've just done 3 rounds of prototyping, they're still not 100%. And to be honest, they probably will never get it 100% perfect. But for them, that's a lot of anxiety. So from my perspective as the design director and manager of this business, a fair bit of my time is client, particularly for startups, is education and execution and mentoring. There's a lot of client management and mentoring that goes on in the background. So I didn't really answer your question about challenges, but I guess the nature of what we do is challenging. And then I guess in more recent times, we've got COVID and supply chain logistics and tyranny of distance issues. It's made it very challenging the last 3 years to do high-speed product development, which you often see in consultancies. Things that would take 6 months are taking 9, and things that would take 9 months are taking 1.5 years, and it's pretty frustrating all around, right? So we are looking forward to this year. We've had a massive run recently with all of our clients wanting to get ready to go, and they're all starting to ship in the coming weeks back to China and kick off their production programs and be on site to oversee new product development, right? So I guess coming back to my statement I made earlier, or the hinted I wanted to talk about or could talk about with you, is the change we've seen with our corporate clients manufacturing in Asia. It's been quite interesting to see that startups and SMEs have been fine. They've been pushing on because when they're bringing new product to market, they're only doing small runs, right? So it's there might be the first off run of a new product to market might be 500 units or 1,000 sets. In the grand scheme of things, that's a partial container load. It's not a big amount. Your large corporates, when they're doing a run, it's 40 containers. It's big money, and they need people on the ground to make sure a new product not just comes off tools right, but goes through the assembly line right, goes through QC, goes all the way through the final boxing, and is put in those containers perfectly. And in the last 3 years, we haven't been able to do that. So we've seen generally in the industry, a lot of big corporates pull back their R&D programs and pause them, or just, slow them down. And I guess the flip side of that, they've had the benefit of being able to run existing portfolio product in a market that's seen often 25 to 30% upticks in sales. So they're selling old product that they've totally paid off all the tools on, all the NRE, all the CapEx is all being paid off on, and products that they would have normally retired. They've had this massive kick up in sales, which they've loved. But anyway, the rush is on now. They've got to get back into the game and get over there and sort out new production as soon as possible.
Do you think that these issues in China are going to cause an effect where people start manufacturing onshore instead of offshore? Or do you think it's not going to have that much of an effect?
Yeah, look, we had in 2019, you might remember we had the tariffs that kicked off between China and the US, and that was pre-COVID. So a lot of our large corporate clients said, Neil, get us, see if you can explore alternative Asian supply chains outside of China, because some of those, depending on the product, some of the tariffs are up to 27%, which is massive, right? That can be profit margin on some products. So we spent a lot of 2019. It was awesome because I was able to reconnect all over Asia and rehouse and redeploy manufacturing programs, to Vietnam, Philippines, Taiwan, Malaysia, and rekindle a lot of manufacturing networks that I've worked with over 20 years. But to be honest, in the last 10 years, it's all been very China centric. So it's been awesome to reconnect and spread that work. And then COVID hit, and then the same manufacturers called me and said, Neil, can you get us home? And that's been far more challenging. I think we've had, and I'm probably being kind, I think probably somewhere between 20 to 30% success on pulling stuff home.
Is that just because we don't have the capabilities anymore?
Yeah, look, it's a combination of things. You've got, obviously when the car industry left and closed down as the primary manufacturers of those, a car is made up of 1,000 systems and 1 million components, right? So you think about all the subsidiary companies that sit underneath that sector. Those subsidiary, secondary and tertiary suppliers that are existing, that are still capable of doing component manufacturing, are the very best, and the ones that we're actually running globally.
Yeah. So
you've gone from a big field of capacity down to, if you think about die casting in this country, there's probably only a handful, less than 10 die casters left in the country. I'm talking high pressure die casting. To my knowledge, I'm happy to be at school at any time. But of those die casters, most of them have gone to zinc, because aluminium, which is essential for so much that we do, takes so much power and so much furnace energy to keep hot compared to zinc, that they've converted their factories over to zinc. So when we're trying to bring high pressure die castings back, say from Asia to do here, we're limited to that group of say 10, and then in that group of 10 we're limited to the 2 or 3 guys companies that are still providing that service, and they're world class, which means they're already peaked, they're already at maximum capacity, and here we are trying to bring in not a massive production run, but a decent production run capacity into the team. And they're saying, look, Neil, can you double or triple that volume for us? Because if you can, we'll build another section of our factory. But if you can't, we're not going to displace one of our existing high volume clients for you. So it's like we need to really commit, and then they'll expand, or we just don't get the action. We can't get the capacity.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's quite interesting at the moment. So it's not like we don't have the skill sets. It's reduced, but we've still got them, and the capability is reduced, but we've still got it. But it's now at capacity. So unless the government or financing mechanisms kick in to unlock more capacity or stand up new ventures, we're going to have a struggle around sovereign capability for a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, COVID really highlighted for me. We were part of a COVID response team for the Australian Design Council and GDA set up. So we basically, a whole bunch of industrial designers and consultants gave their time in kind to help source, develop, produce, manufacture PPE gear. And I found it really interesting how as a nation, how little we have around. We've got still like tertiary and final stage product manufacturing, but secondary and primary feedstock, we're in real trouble.
Hmm.
You know, I remember ringing up suppliers for PETG film that was I think it was 3M, and it was medical grade, and I can't remember the exact details now because it's been a few years ago, but I remember on one day I rang up and there was like 130 kilometers of the film in the country, and I must have rung up a week later and we're down to 22 kilometers, and then by the final week we were out, and that was it, right?
Wow.
And at the same time, you're seeing reports on the news of us traditionally shipping Coke bottles out to China to get shredded and reprocessed into film, but it's the same material. We're not processing it here, and we can't produce it into other feedstock for other channels. So, something to think about as an emerging designer, and if I can carve out time in my day, I'm really wanting to build it as a project, is helping map the existing manufacturing ecosystem across primary feedstock to tertiary product supply, and seeing where our holes are in terms of supply.
Hmm.
And where those holes are is where a circular economy initiative can occur.
Hmm.
And a circular economy initiative is also a sovereign capability initiative. And it's been a big thing. I've had the epiphany over COVID, and every government official I can find and I'll tell that story to, because they're not quite joining the dots that sovereign capability and circular economy are actually the same thing, or very, very linked, I should say. So I find that fascinating, and it's, at some stage this year I'll try and find time to seek out some partners to explore that further. But
I suppose that's the issue of globalization. We've taken so many operations offshore now that we've lost a lot of competitive advantage, and we pretty much relying on all these other countries. But
yeah, it is interesting, mate. I think it's the defence, the Australian federal government is activating what they can through Defence Force initiatives. And at the end of the day, when you stand back, you look at any government entity or structure or organisation, it's very passive. It's a passive entity. Whether it's our friendly politicians that move quite, a bit like those executives I started telling you about in the large corporates. They're quite transient, depending on which party's in at the time. So the knowledge holding and the leadership around a sector is up to years at a time. And inside the silos of each of those ministerial portfolios, there's no active neural network. It's very passive.
Hmm.
And the only active method they found at the moment, well, one of them, they're obviously standing up a whole bunch of initiatives, but the one I'm seeing a lot of money being spent in that's translating to meaningful manufacturing ventures standing up is military endeavors, which is interesting. But
that just shows, like, I mean, we're offshore to even a lot of the military manufacturing processes, and like even from like a defense standpoint, it's pretty bad decision.
Yeah,
Something goes down, we don't even have the capabilities to make our own weapons. Like it's not really that sustainable.
Yeah, no, it is interesting times. It is interesting times, but it's I'm seeing a will. I'm seeing whether it's as close as family members to just general consumer trends, and generational shifts in terms of buying power. People are quite interested in understanding and spending more on sovereign capability or sovereign produced goods. And that's going to have to happen, as well as us just be smarter about how we're producing these things if we are going to be doing them local.
Yeah. So you kind of already mentioned this, but just in terms of sustainability, how does it play a role in your job as a designer, and what steps do you take to ensure your designs are eco-friendly, or at least you do your best to make them eco-friendly?
Yeah. So as I said, it's sort of, we'll work with the client depending on the nature of the client. If it's an entrepreneur, well, even big corporates, right? They've never really done a life cycle walkthrough of their products. So one of the first things we do before we kick off a project is we will, and I'm talking, not necessarily hour by hour, but at least week by week to 2 months perspective, walk through the supply chain journey all the way through to the procurement logistics journey, all the way through to the product's shipping, to its unboxing, to its setup, to its use, all the way through to its first maintenance cycle and then its first end of life experience. We will map that to death. And we do that with the designers, and I do that with the team involved. And that innately briefs the team on the expectations and the challenges, far beyond any written brief can. And it also educates the client on how much work they have to do, because a lot of that journey they have no idea about. We have more idea than they do about that through all our past project experience, right? So, and in there we have moments where we can talk to them about sustainability and sustainable actions they can take now. If they're an emerging company that's building their processes and their business model, we can have great impact. If it's an older company that's got factories in Europe and China and Taiwan, and they've got these facilities and massive overhead and burden, and they've got all these invested supply chain networks and tentacles, it comes less, and it becomes about material choices, design for manufacturing, design for disassembly, design for maintenance, and we can have those kind of impacts as well. So, I've had some conversations where, let's not design a product, let's just make it a software service. Let's not do that, right? So, and you can have that conversation with an emerging startup. It's very hard to do it with a granddaddy business or a very established business. So, yeah, so it's all the time, and every time we get the chance, we're trying to change and shift the needle. Constantly spending money on resources and supply kits. We just invested a lot of money in a sustainable non-food grade, so non-food supply chain biopolymer supply chain kit that came through from Denmark the other day. And I've just assigned Sarah, my senior designer here, and her role, she's half Danish, so she's obviously got the ability to speak with the corporations. She's trying to track now, how do we get those materials that are awesome materials? How do we get bags of them to trial? And then how do we get supply chain out of Europe to our suppliers in Asia and work through the logistics of that? And that's horrendously difficult, right? And we're funding that. So that's an example of me just funding that exercise to try and solve the solutions for our clients, because if there's too many barriers, they'll just default out to what's standard. So I'm trying to remove the barriers, say, well, this is how we do it, and this is the costing. And sure, there's a tariff, but it's only 2%, and we can manage that. And here's the solution. So let's do it. And it's a very different exercise, a very different conversation if you have that solution provided. So I guess we're trying to answer your question, we're being as proactive as we can at every point in the life cycle of that product's development or that business's development. And we're retrospectively trying to solve and fix supply chain problems that we're seeing at the moment.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. Like, it's not as simple as use sustainable materials. It's sometimes they're not even available. Like, the system isn't set up to, have those materials available to manufacture. So I suppose that is probably, like, in a way, that's where government mandation is going to need to come in, because, like, if corporations aren't forced to require to set up those systems, it's a lot harder to get the ball rolling.
Yeah, for sure.
But
yes, man. And I guess I'm really looking forward to, and you guys are probably aware of the trend, the right for repair trend that's coming through from Europe. We're looking forward to that. I think that's going to be, and that's not simple either, right? If you look at what Sweden and Norway and those and Finland are doing around right for repair, they're standing up whole education systems around trades. Like an appliance electrician hasn't been taught in Sweden in 20-something years, I think I read the other day. So that's effectively whatever the Swedish version of TAFE is. They're rebuilding that TAFE course to then train technicians so that I can take my washing machine or my dryer to that location, actually have someone who's qualified to help me fix it.
Yeah, so that's the thing. No one's even qualified anymore. Like I used to have I had a 1975 record player, and I couldn't even get anyone to fix it. There's one guy in Brisbane who can fix it, and he's like 85 years old, and once he's gone, we'll be screwed. Like, yeah, that's it. There's no one to do it. So yeah, it's interesting. That's what you're saying. The young people just don't really know how to do it because they never were trained it. Like, these people, they had their whole careers in that.
Yeah, well, we were working with a sheet metal company the other day, and they got a job, a local company, just a really good quality sheet metal contract manufacturer, and they had a contract to do I think it was a massive brass bar down the Gold Coast, one of those fancy hotels. It was like 30 or 40 meters of brass, and them knowing me, knowing I had a lot of connections in the industry, they called me up and said, Neil, do you know any like braziers? Do you know any guys that can still braze? And I went, oh, maybe. So I had to ring around a few and found these old guys that were literally, as you say, well and truly retired. and actually we're former TAFE teachers, it turns out, but they ended up going down and teaching these guys and all the young tradesmen down there how to braze again. It was a really, unfortunately I wasn't there to see it, but I got called up a week later, said it was a pretty magical experience for the guys to be taught by these old craftsmen and wizards about how to do an ancient craft that for this project was essential, right? But couldn't do. You see it in plumbing, right? You can't get, plumbers don't braze anymore. They just have these polycrimp pipes that just hydraulically crimp onto fittings now. You know, it's sort of definitely dying art, that one.
Yeah, I mean, even like I don't know, the amazing design of a lot of old products had been lost. Like the mechanical aspect of a lot of products, like back in the day, you know, film cameras, record players, watches, all mechanical, and like the way they were designed was so amazing. Like the people who designed them were, you know, truly amazing at like working how everything can work together to, you know, create the overall goal. And these days, like you can just get a electronic circuit board to pretty much do everything that they used to be able to do. But like the sustainability aspect isn't necessarily there. Like you can buy a camera from like the 1970s that's probably still running, but will a camera from these days be running in that time? Probably not.
No.
Yeah,
that's right. That's right. Yeah, it's interesting, mate. And I guess the trade craft of, you know, industrial design is still very much a thing. And you know, it's interesting how I find it intriguing around, you know, yes, we can dig into it as well if you want, but like the we talked about strategic industrial design and design thinking and design system design and all that user experience design, and that's all important and it's all there. But more so now with the industry 4.0 as traditional industrial design, it's never been more important. And you know, when I'm having every second client wanting to put a Wi-Fi chip in this glass and make the internet connected, right? There's no industrial designers left that understand how to make the glass, right? They all know how to program the Arduino board and how to, you know, do the firmware and the basic code to connect it to Amazon Web Services. But no one understands the materiality of the old trade craft of industrial design, and it's never gone away. It's still been here, and if anything, it's more important. There's more need for it than ever. So it's kind of interesting that, you know, I guess globally we've got an education problem where education is shifting away from those traditional industrial design skill sets that we need and the industry screaming for fundamentally.
Well, even with like global chip shortages, it's probably gonna like a lot of cars just can't even be manufactured at the moment because there's such a limitation in chip shortages. So maybe there'll be more of a reliance moving back to those mechanical processes. I don't know, you know, to have that availability.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because like even thinking like if you need these days, as you're saying, if you need to design a glass, you include a chip in the bottom to do something. But if it can be done without the digital process or the electronic process, maybe we need to resort back to that and, you know, make it in a more mechanical way.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And you know, it's I often see that with MVP stuff, right? When we're working with entrepreneur clients, I go straight to level 4 and it's Wi-Fi enabled, supporting app, which is fine and happy to work in those projects. But in reality, if it is a new to market or new to world product, we can actually probably prove its value to at least 50 to 75% surety by just running a Gen 1 mechanical version or even a hybrid, right? An electromechanical version. It doesn't have to be a full software enabled version at Gen 1. And in terms of industrial design, in terms of product development costs, the R&D and the hardware is never usually the most expensive when it comes to a level 4 IoT device, right? So it's always software and firmware is the really expensive part of the play. So just from a business strategy perspective, you know, if you can get it into market and get it valuable and meaningful to customers where they're going to drive a business off it, and it hasn't had that level of IoT enablement, then it's actually a sensible way to go.
Yeah, it's a good way to look at it. Can you discuss the importance of manufacturing within your process and how you help young designers get to that point of being able to design for manufacturing?
Yeah, so this is one of these critical trade craft skills, right, that we're missing now out of the sector, out of education in the sector, and we're seeing it, you know, all the way back to high school. You know, I'm starting to see young graduates who are coming through university programs, and when you engage them and you look at their portfolios and you talk to them in interview context, you're like, did you do any shop at high school? Oh no, we were a STEM high school. Ah, what does that mean? I'm like, oh, well, it wasn't really a focus or a priority for me and my parents, so we just focused on straight sciences and those sort of things. Like, okay, but you do want to do industrial design. Oh, I love industrial design. Okay, so even that practicality around materiality and manufacturing missing at a high school level.
Yeah.
And it's not getting backfilled to the same extent it was in my education and in current unis. So that training burden around trade craft industrial design for manufacturing is all on the employer now. And I remember when I got my first job, I was lucky enough to get it. Actually, I got it with Craig off the back of a third year DFMA project. You know, those reverse engineering teardown projects. One of the projects I did pretty well in, and he just happened to be my guest lecturer at the time and was pretty stoked with what myself and my group mate did, and he offered us an internship. And when I asked him why he picked us out of the 40 odd other groups that were presenting, he's like, you guys had the innate knowledge around how to manufacture that product. I could see in the way you were presenting it that my training burden was the least, but your talent level was just as high as everyone else's.
Yeah.
So, and he probably put 6 to 12 months of training into me before I was profit positive, right? And I think now we're looking at years of training. It's probably 2 to 3 years of training a graduate before they're profit positive. And it's not just manufacturing knowledge; it's everything. It's CAD, it's sketching, it's visualizations. There's a real issue around bringing all those skill sets up to level to the point where you can give them a project, a set budget, and they can execute and deliver the client at an industry standard, right? Which is obviously world-class standard. That's on budget.
Yeah.
So anyway, coming back to your point around DFMA and manufacturing. So, and you mentioned it before, in Australia, we tend to run the smaller firms, the smaller businesses, the smaller industrial design consultancies, and then the smaller manufacturing companies don't have siloed or specialized R&D teams. They have an industrial designer. And that industrial designer has to go from marketing, feedback, and brief all the way through to China oversee mass production.
Yep.
Whereas if we're in a larger corporate or a larger industrial design team, some of the tier 1 consultancies that we're lucky to have here in this country, you'll see them start to split their front end, their creative front end, to their technical back end, and have disciplines being represented in that workflow. And that's particularly an American model. You'll see that a lot in the States. I've got mates that I graduated with that are creative front end, and they work not only in just that area, but they work in a particular market sector. Like, he just does dishwasher facades, and that's all he does, just works on dishwashers. So, that specialization get really niche in those big corporates. So in the Australian context, and to a degree, a lot of if you think of our founding fathers around consultancies here, and then the industrial design sector here, it's heavily European influenced, I think. You'll see that jack of all trades, designer, does everything methodology is existent through our ecosystem, especially at a smaller corporate level, and particularly at a smaller corporate level in Europe as well. So, and then, I don't know, you probably haven't seen it yet, but when you get out and travel and you engage with other design teams around the world, because of that, we do everything necessity realistically in Australia, that when you go to these big corporates, multinationals, the design directors are Australian. If they're not Australian, there's a fair chance, 90% chance they're Kiwis, right? Because from when they got their first job, they were asked to do everything. They become masters of everything, which means they're actually perfect design directors and design managers, because they can control all the disciplines with that, I guess that master level of craft. Yeah.
So I suppose in a way you can see it as a competitive advantage to some degree.
Oh, definitely. Like, you 3 to 4 years experience working in the Australian context will immediately elevate you, or should. Obviously, you have to be a talented, driven, and passionate designer. But if you're there, you'll immediately become senior designer or design manager level in say the American context.
Mm.
I've seen it far too many times for it to
Yeah.
not be a trend. It's definitely a fact.
Okay. Yeah.
So, you know, that's a good thing to do, right? It's not think that you're at a disadvantage here, you're at an advantage. I guess the challenge is to get into that work space, you need to step up your knowledge centers across a vast array of manufacturing disciplines. You know, if I think about the studio right now, we've got extrusions, high pressure die castings, blow moldings, injection moldings, compression rubber moldings. Yeah. Sheet metal, just so much sheet metal.
Yeah.
You know, some bit of gravity casting at the moment as well. Just some traditional furniture. We're doing some furniture at the moment. So we've got some traditional woodworking and when I say traditional, it's traditional materials, but using CNC processes and automation levels of manufacture. So, you know, you have to have a knowledge across all sectors. So as a young designer, I guess our advice to you is you know, and Craig, I think about my old boss, he encouraged me to go and do this outside of hours. You know, he was always, not that he's like, you know, he was always empowering us as his design team to go and seek knowledge. And I'd often grab a couple of cartons of beer, and I'd obviously before going, I'd ring up a factory that I hadn't been to that might have been part of our network, and I say, mate, I'm one of Craig's junior designers, can I come over after 3 o'clock on a Friday and actually have a bit of a tour and then maybe give the guys some beers? Now that's maybe not the most culturally appropriate thing to do this day, but that's sort of how I engaged and understood and took the burden off my employer, but showed initiative around learning. And at the same time, I picked up a network contact and a knowledge of industry, right? So I'd spend a lot of my time doing that and understanding innately the process and following a piece of sheet metal from sitting on a rack all the way through to its final powder coated stage. And spending time with the guys, understanding what the limitations are of a gooseneck press or a laser cutter or whatever the case may be, so that, you know, when it came time to design in that materiality, I had a level of understanding that meant it was not just feasible, but I could actually push it. You know, the difference between good and great products is often how we push the manufacturers to do better, to do something they've never done before.
Yeah.
And that's where the design spirit comes into this situation, right? So, and
But
that's
to push,
where
you have to know the
innovation occurs.
limitations first.
What's that mean?
But to push, you have to know the limitations. That's the thing.
You
Yeah.
have to know the limitations and obviously the foundations and build the experience model that you have across these areas. And so I think, you know, from if you, I guess this talks about educating, you know, this podcast is about downloading our knowledge and trying to share it with emerging designers. I think, you know, initiative is key, and understanding what you don't know, and projecting forward. You say, well, if in 2 years' time, if I want to be this designer in this kind of context, what do I think the knowledge areas are I need?
Yeah.
And just start filling them, right? And at some point on that journey, you'll keep applying for jobs in something like where you want to be, and the burden of training will have reduced. And the design director will go, actually, this guy or this girl's got enough skills that I can bring them on, and they're going to be useful for me. And sure, they don't know about blow molding yet. It's clear to me they haven't done any injection molding, but they actually are pretty good. They're pretty strong at sheet metal, and any good consultancy in Australia will have a fair bit of sheet metal going through it, right? So you can see how suddenly, as an employer, I'm starting to think, right, okay, well, the burden's low. I can probably I've got 2 or 3 projects I could use this junior designer on. Yeah, let's give them a go, right? Where at the moment it's like, right, I have to teach them on. Oh, that's the other thing I want to talk about. So let's say you spent, you know, you get a job somewhere. I think, and as the other, I guess, recommendation I have is any job is a good job, right? At this point in time in your career, and it may not be aligned with values, or it may not be aligned with where you want to be as a career goal or an aspiration perspective, and you may not be picking up the design skills that you want in that first vocation. But you'll definitely be picking up professional practice skills. You'll definitely be picking up, you know, team working and managerial skills, or how to react to managers. You'll understand, you know, business ethics around communication and email. You'll start understanding all these other tacit and not really discussed parts of working in a business context. But as an employer with a graduate, I still have to train, right? Not just the design skills. I have to teach all that other stuff. So if you can actually lift the burden off around professional practice, which may not be related to a design, but just business professional practice, and get that experience anywhere, again, you're helping reduce the burden of employment, or burden of training, I should say.
Mm.
I think
Yeah.
about some of the guys I employed back in the day at the CM, when I say employed, interviewed and Craig employed back in the day at the CMD. You know, I can remember some of the guys coming through and they'd spent a couple of years at Acacia Ridge working for HVAC manufacturers, which like just industrial HVAC manufacturers, like huge air conditioners that sit on top of Bunnings, right?
Mm.
Like the most unattractive objects. But you look at these guys, their work, and they trained under, you know, a very meticulous sheet metal master, and their sheet metal skills were off the chart. The technical drafting skills were off the chart. Their project management skills were off the chart. Their professional communication, because they had to deal with all these contractors, was off the chart. Good, right? Tick, 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 tick. So if this guy can do this, and he's got this portfolio, and he's got a passion, then we can teach him how to injection mold, and we can teach him how to blow mold, and we can teach him all those other skills. So this is a highly employable talent, right?
Mm.
So anyway, I guess I'm trying to summarize is just look for the opportunities in any position that comes. And I think, you know, if it was Greg or one of the other guys, Anton said that, you know, you always leave a company stronger than you found it. So always leave a positive impression and provide positive change.
Mm.
And then there's no real issue with you moving on from, you know, every couple of years to keep pursuing that career goal, I guess.
Mm. Yeah, that's really good advice. In terms of technology, what technology trends do you see are going to have the most impact on design in the coming years?
Yeah, well, everyone's talking about AI obviously at the moment.
The buzzword.
The buzzword. Look, it's interesting. I spent some time the other day thinking about it and actually having a look through the T's and C's of a few of these emerging AI design assistant apps and stuff like that. At the moment, I don't know if you've had a look at them, but you know, I'm not a lawyer, but when I look at them and I read them, it's quite clear to me, and I'm happy to be schooled again, that the input that you put in is yours, but any derivative works that the AI has generated is theirs.
Yeah.
So in terms of a consultant that wants to generate IP on behalf of the client, and then as part of our service, gift that IP to the client, we effectively embargoed from using those kind of platforms at the moment.
That's the thing. Do you hear about what happened with Amazon? How Amazon was saying their workers had to stop using ChatGPT because ChatGPT was pumping out results that were actual like background information that no one was meant to know within Amazon.
I didn't know that. Wow. Yeah.
That's
okay.
quite interesting.
Yeah. So and I guess, you know, at the moment I see, and then I think this is just a symptom of the immaturity of it at the moment and the inputs it's pulling on. But when you look at Midjourney and stuff, it's really average concepts presented beautifully, incredibly quickly. And that's the wow factor, is the presentation quality and the speed. But when you look at the resolution of the concepts, they would never have been generated by a professional designer.
Yeah.
So at some point there's going to be, you know, and this is the interesting point, is will they keep feeding the inputs so that when a designer asks them to do an F1 car that's styled like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, will that F1 car start adopting aerodynamic inputs and starting to put spoilers where spoilers should be and downdraft where downdraft should be? Or is it just going to always have this generative aesthetic merge of separate inputs? So it's interesting, mate. I'm interested to see where it goes, and I'm excited to see how it affects our workflow. And I'm interested to see how they manage. And it's probably through the business model, right? They'll probably manage it through free subscriptions are always theirs, and paid for subscriptions are proprietary to the subscriber, perhaps. I'm not sure. But either way, they'll need to work through the business model before it becomes something we can use. The other thing, obviously, for us is, you know, seeing the advances in additive manufacturing, I think is interesting. You know, I think I come out of our digital lab, digital fabrication lab, and I hold things up to the team and I go, you have no idea how good this is. Like when I started, we had, you know, laminated bread models, and we'd have to send all our stuff away to, you know, a bureau, and it would take 2 weeks to get a part back. But literally we can print something. The guys have all set the machines going tonight, and Monday they're going to have assemblies that they can put together. And not just in, you know, simulants, in materials that are so realistic to what the production materials would be. So, you know, 4D printing, obviously, you're probably across that. It's really interesting seeing how 4D printing is coming along. And then starting to see the speeds really step up for laser process printers and projection printers. Still nowhere near fast enough for us to use in a meaningful way for mass production, but yeah, we'll see. We'll see how fast it can get.
Yeah. Do you think that if the 3D printing realm sped up in an exponential level, do you think that that would maybe remove the need for designers to have as much manufacturing background if everything could just be made with 3D? I mean, a lot of things can be made with 3D printing, you know? Like, would it be more important to be amazing at 3D printing opposed to, you know, have all this background?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely a thing. I think that's something you should definitely be across 3D printing and understand its freedoms that allows versus the restrictions that traditional manufacturing may impose on the design process.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm doing this project at the moment with this manufacturer in China, and I was like, what are the constraints? And because I thought it was going to be injection molded, and then he's like, oh, 3D printing, the only limitation is draft angle. Like it's just pretty amazing the difference between traditional processes.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, for sure. And you're seeing the combination of 3D printing with, you know, generative AI based morphology CAD and that sort of stuff. That synergy coming together. I must say I'm not a fan of the aesthetic it generates, you know, but incredible seeing how that's coming together to produce these ultra high performance engineering solutions with minimal material. And from a sustainability perspective, we've got to go that way, right? We can't keep having subtractive processes. We have to have as needed, on demand, additive or grown manufacturing methods, but with a recycling system feeding into that as well, right?
It's really interesting because, you know, generative design aesthetic is actually quite organic. Like it looks like something you'd see in nature. So it's almost like we're moving back towards, you know, the basis in nature. Like, because if you look at a current product, it looks very, you know, unnatural compared to the natural landscape. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's something about, it's the same reason we facet a diamond, right? There's something about the human input and the craft and the transition from one state to another that has an embedded value and a perceived value. The craftsmanship means something, right? So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out between the human made versus the additive made or the 3D printed solution, and see how that plans out in the future. And I'm intrigued. I don't have an opinion either way. I'm just intrigued to see how it goes.
Yeah. Yeah, it might be a bit like the Australian made stamp of approval kind of thing, you know, like the handmade aspect opposed to a 3D printed product. There's the value there. Yeah.
Well, you're already starting to see the hashtags no AI on a lot of Instagram posts at the moment, right? So people are clearly feeling like they need to state that this was all human, this development. It wasn't generated through DALI or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's exciting. I don't know, mate. I think I'm interested to see. We're seeing a globalization to some degree is definitely had some real knocks over COVID, and I think it's interesting seeing companies start to pivot and decentralize and start having more regional manufacturing, and whether that spins out to being whether that manifests itself to being one global product being made in several locations, or whether they're going to start having, you know, a North American SKU versus an Australian or Asia Pacific SKU of product versus, you know, whether we're going to start seeing culturally specific product design again, which would be quite interesting, I think, from our perspective, from our practice perspective. Yeah, interesting.
How do you approach collaborating with other design professionals, engineers, and manufacturers on a project?
Yeah, so you know, if it's so I guess that's part of the group, right? Clandestine design group. So the group's not about. I got asked this the other day by a client, what the group's about, and he assumed I owned a heap of businesses, but I don't. I'd like to one day, but it's about our network partners, right? So it's about the people that I've been working with for 20-something years that are supporting collaborators and professionals, and they can range from brand designers, and a brand designer obviously is a little bit more strategic than just a graphic designer doing a logo, like a proper strategic brand agency, all the way through to electrical engineers, obviously, firmware engineers, software engineers, full app development consultancies. And then you've got your highly regulated fields where in your med tech, you're going to have medical design officers and regulatory officers and then medical engineers and material scientists. And then you've got your, you've got to think about your business side. You've got your grant advisors, your R&D tax officials. You've got IP attorneys, legal and litigation defense attorneys. There's this massive R&D network of professions that come together around us or with us, and we're part of it. And it's part of what I love about this industry actually is how supportive we are of our other related disciplines and how much we work together on projects. So, we've got IoT projects at the moment. You might have seen on the website, I've seen in our press, we helped a young team that was a UQ spin out do Monty, which was I don't know if it's the world's first, but it's probably one of the world's first IoT compost sensors. So she was a recent graduate from UQ. She went through the iLab accelerator program. I mentor that accelerator from time to time, and met Ashley, and we helped to take her idea, which was how to produce the world's friendliest, smartest compost monitor, from a concept all the way through to production. And that involved all of those elements, right? All those partners came together, and we were working day in, day out with them hand in hand as we took the project through and took her through the journey of R&D, which is pretty risky and can be pretty expensive if we get it wrong.
Yeah. So
how do we do it? It's literally, a whole bunch of conversations at the start, me pulling the team together and seeing where the capacity lies. Obviously we're all under a confidentiality agreement, so we can actually talk about these concepts and make sure there's no conflicts of interest, right? So we can't have a brand designer working for us if they're currently doing another compost monitor company, right? So you have to get the conflicts of interest sorted out and then the capacity sorted out, and you bring the team together, and obviously the client needs to feel like the team's right. So there's a whole lot of human management skills that happen at the start if I'm taking the lead on the project management side. And then we've got to, and I'm grateful that we've been working so long together that those guys will give some gratis time, some in-kind time to flesh out the scope. And we'll run a couple of workshops together, and then they'll go away and basically scope and quote their parts of the project. And then we align our timelines, and then we work out how we're going to do it. And in Ashley's case, it was a very successful project. For other clients, we might be able to get them to a certain position, and then we need to get a VC pitch deck together, and we'll help them go out and get VC investment before we take them to the next stage. So that's that mentoring and management part I was telling you about. It's not just doing design. There's business growth management and business mentoring that happens with. It doesn't have to be me. I don't do every project. In some of the projects, it's the brand designer taking the lead, or it might be electrical engineering consultancy that's taking the lead. We're all intimately knowledgeable enough around our processes that we can happily take those leads on those projects.
Okay. What can you share some insights on industrial design, on the future of industrial design, and how you see the field evolving in the decade, and maybe also speak to how you saw it evolve in the past, as you mentioned before?
Yeah, I think it's I think industrial. If I think back to when I started, we had, Craig came from, he's English trained, European, so English, he went to university in England, and was born in, raised in England, did a lot of professional development and working in Europe, then America, and then came out to visit family in Australia, and he saw that there was an opportunity to stand up a real European design consultancy, like a European style consultancy, an Anglo-German or Anglo-Austrian style consultancy in Australia. And when he did his tour around the country, he kind of thought, well, Brisbane's a pretty lovely space. I'll set one up here. And if you think about, I guess, the challenges he had and that we had as the team working under him, is that he was wanting to have those same conversations, those mature design-led, design innovation conversations with corporates that just didn't even know what an industrial designer was. So he had to go on an industry level education program at the same time he was trying to obviously get work and feed us as a bunch of hungry nows and grow the business. So it was quite challenging, and he did incredibly well. And he wasn't the only one. There's obviously Scott Cox and Scott
Rob
Farley
Geddes.
and Rob Geddes. Those guys were all there doing the same, trying to lift the industry and train executives and general managers and founders around the importance of design. We had Murray and John Brown and Mark and Fred down in Melbourne. And these are all, you look at those big consultancies, they're all very much English centric, or they've come from England, or they've got that European flavor about them. So there was that that was all that sort of generation, and they were standing up these consultancies and making an impact, which I guess we and you particularly, and I know I benefited from it in my career, and you're going to benefit from it as well. That those guys put a massive amount of effort in to establish industrial design as a formidable and valuable asset to R&D ecosystem. So, when Craig was, when we were working on work, it was, we were always severely limited by volume, because it's, again, as I said, in that sort of that era, and it's probably been like this for the same, that our clients were always servicing the Australian context. So 25 million people. If you're going to do a pool chlorinator for a company in Brisbane that's selling to the Australian market, you might be doing orders of 500 at a time, maybe 5,000 a year. But if you're Onga out of Europe, it's 100,000 pool chlorinators every order. So immediately, the challenge for us was how do we design a solution that stands up nationally, that also stands up internationally if the client can ever get them to the software where they want to actually export, that's been done on a business model and a CapEx and an NRE model of 500 units at a time, versus the Onga engineers in Europe that are all injection molded, pumping beautiful product out at fractions of the cost that we are producing sheet metal or extrusions or compression molded enclosure systems, because we can't justify the business model of spending, $10,000 to $100,000 on tooling, because we don't have the volume to support that tooling expense. So real challenging, and it made us really creative, and it made us do things that the rest of the world hadn't done. And I guess that's the necessity drives innovation bit, right? So I found that really interesting in the start of my career, and I often will fall back on it. We've got a client that wants to do a beta, and they don't want to overinvest in. They think the volume's big, but they don't want to overinvest. Well, let's do a low batch production style design that's perfect for a particular process that won't break your bank, and we can market validate with that. Okay, so that's skill sets I learned 20 years ago that I'm bringing forward now. But now with the client context, now we are global, and clients are exporting, and they're not just relying on the 25 million we've got here. And we are designing for scale, and we are designing for injection moldings and mass production, high quality, world-class product. And that just wasn't a thing 20 years ago. So there's been a real shift in that market design for that market acceptance, I guess.
Okay. As you mentioned previously, when we spoke via email, you came from a Bauhaus-focused education. How do you see that affected you as a designer, and maybe speak to the specific things that you think it gave you?
Yeah, so old man Gropius, Walter, I don't know when it was, 1920 something, 22, I think. He and the senior leaders of the Bauhaus, they're obviously very architectural focused originally. But I don't know if you've ever studied it or looked at the course structure. That preliminary course was around foundational knowledge that would be used and useful for your core secondary course of focus. And how that translated to, I guess, a Bauhausian influenced education that was existing all through the world. Still does. There's still unis that do this, but all through the world in, say, 2000, when I was going through 1998 to 2001, is that when I think about my first year, and it might be interesting to compare notes with your first year, we had a design stream, but I did physics, chemistry, geography, biology, history general, but of art, science, but also of industrial design particularly. And you think, well, what's chemistry got to do with it? Well, when my guys turn to me and says, we're going to do a painted enclosure, what paint should we use? They're looking at it at a very top level of understanding around, they're looking on the back of the pack to see if the paint has warning lights around, do not put on ABS. Or I'm saying, well, what's the paint solvent base? What's this molecular structure? What polymer are you putting on? and I'm understanding that the solvents will attack those monomer chains at a chemistry level.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a level of understanding that's foundational that I have that my junior designers just don't have. So in order for them never to not make that mistake, a mistake I would never have made, I have to, that's that training burden kicking in again around those old tradecraft skills. I have to train them that knowledge and get them to understand that. We did electrical engineering, right? I can remember electrical engineering classes that we did with electrical engineers. So there was a lot of us moving around in that first and second year to different schools inside engineering and taking advantage out of those classes and learning those skills. So, you know, the number of times I've taught young electrical engineers around the benefits of a Hall effect sensor and different technologies that they're just not using anymore that we can use in the context of electromechanical device. Sure, part of that's my experience working in industry, but there's a lot of that foundation knowledge came from that preliminary course that we had in those early years.
Yeah.
And as we went up through the years, you know, we had other pillars of design or industrial design were critical. So always making. So every design project had to have physical product or models associated with it. CAD was introduced early. You know, I think about the CAD software we learned over those 4 years was AutoCAD, Pro E, Rhino, eventually SolidWorks. And it was trained at a level where it was, you know, there was, I don't know what happens now. It's been many years since I've been, you know, involved in universities, but fundamentally we were always taught by industry practitioners. I used to teach CAD, for example, when I was recently graduated. And everything I learned from my consultancy, I was, you know, applying back into my course content that I was delivering at uni.
Yeah.
So it's
university is very different structure now. Like, opposed to being taught CAD, you have to teach yourself CAD, and then you're given like the task to apply it to. So like it's a very different thing. Like obviously, I think your contact time back then would have been way more than it is now. Like a lot of university now is non-contact. It's you're expected to do all that work at home. You know, the actual time you spend with your lecturers and your tutors is very low. And
yeah, I mean, I see it with my junior designers, right? And I guess I've been training junior designers in the consultancy context for 15 years, and I've seen that shift over that time. And there's some other really interesting things that may not be apparent to you, but apparent to me, like because we were a fixed stream, single course cohort, right, with huge contact hours, as you say, we lived at uni. Right? Literally, we would sleep in the mezzanines in J Block, and we would fight for CAD lab space, and we would defend with our lives the CAD labs against the interior designers, right? So there was this incredible contact time that occurred with our peers, and we were all going through the same stream at once. So there was, when I say it's fixed stream, there was no major minor, and there was no mix and match your subjects. So you couldn't, back then it was an industrial design degree. The other thing we were encouraged to do, and we actively did, was that because we were at uni so much, is we engaged with all the years above and below us. And when I was in first year and the fourth years were presenting, we would go and see their presentations. Because we had just seen their presentations get developed in the CAD labs and the printers that week. So like, this is a really nice designs here. We should go see them get presented. And that contact time and that community, that tribe that came as a result, actually makes you pretty competitive, because you're not benchmarking against the guy in your class. You're benchmarking against what you saw last year that was a fourth year project.
Yeah.
It was the best project you've ever seen. So you start getting quite competitive and pushing to excel in the context of your community. And then the thing that I find interesting with these guys is when I graduated, because, you know, I can't remember the exact numbers, but let's say in every year there might be 50 students. Some years there's 100 and something students. But when I graduated, I knew 300 people ahead of me, or 150 people ahead of me intimately, in terms of industry network. They're already out there. And then I'm going to know 150 people coming behind me. So if I'm 3 years out, there's you know, between 150 and 300 people that I know intimately that I can call on and connect with. If it's something going to work, I'm like, oh, Barry's working at a rotor molder on the north side. I'll give him a call and see if he can do this project for me.
Yeah.
Shannon's working at a signage company. He might be able to have a laser cutter that can cut something for me. But the junior designers coming out now, because they've been working remotely, as you're saying, and teaching remotely, but they've also got these mixed streams of content. I don't know that they know each other very well. I don't know that you know everyone in
Well,
your course very well.
even worse now because of COVID. I was lucky. I did 1 year before COVID and 1 year after COVID. Well, 1 year like at the end in person. But some of my peers, they only did the final year that they when they graduated last year in person. The first year of their 3 or 4 year degree.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying there's still let's reframe a little bit. I think the modern design education still has some value. I mean, it's incredibly broad what it's teaching students now, which is good. So think about the breadth of knowledge you've gained, which I think it's good. But at the same time, I think it's come there needs to be a balance. I think somehow we need to work out, and it's probably against I'm a pretty pragmatic business owner, so I understand that this also is a business model that needs to be sustainable. But the T-depth designers we were getting, which was a really strong but broad skill of design understanding, and then a really deep trade craft knowledge, has really shortened up and then broadened out.
Yeah.
So depending on where you want to go in your career, that broader, flatter T kind of designer that's graduating now globally will find a nice niche. But if you do actually dearly want to work in industrial design as a practicing trade craft industrial designer, you need to fill that bit of the T up.
Yeah.
And, so that's I guess that's the challenge, and that's just the nature of the beast that you guys are faced with. But I think I've always been impressed with my junior designers' ability, and you look at you're building this podcast to try and show initiative around gaining this knowledge.
Yeah.
Designers can actually, to quote Vince Ross, designers can design their life, right? And you're a case in point. But so I think that's interesting though. I just want to go back to that community is something that I remember when the unis came out and engaged with industry about showing that they were going to break up the course in whenever it was mid-2000s and run this major minor. And so they did the right thing. They engaged with industry, and industry went, yeah, cool. So you're saying you could have an industrial designer majoring in industrial design and minoring in Chinese language? Yes. Oh, that's friggin' awesome. I must have said, I've never seen that actually happen yet. I don't know if that's possible, but I'd love to have a graduate industrial designer with Chinese language and industrial design. Anyway, so that they did the engagement and went, cool, that makes sense. But we, at the time, and it's all, everything's wise in hindsight, I never realized until training the recent wave of graduates just how disconnected they are from industry, how disconnected they are from their own cohort, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I have established some really good friendships at the end of my degree, actually, in the final year. But before that, I barely knew anyone. Like, I had passing people I spoke to in groups, but realistically, I wouldn't say I had any friends as such, like quality people that I know well.
It's
acquaintances at that point, really.
By our third and fourth year, there was large sections of our class that were all living together in different shares because you become such great colleagues and friends. And that just manifests itself out in the industry now. So if you think about the design directors now around Australia, and probably this is being repeated globally, we're all and I guess that's probably what industry is, a jovial collaborative industry, is that we're all so well connected from that time. If I think about the guys who graduated around my era, they're running Design Works or Formza or Catapult or the different consultancies around the world. That is my generation that came out of that tight, connected, single stream, I guess, design education. So anyway, that's, I guess, what can you do, right? I can't see.
Well, that's part of the reason why I started the podcast, because I think I get to meet more people in industry and get some more contacts and learn.
I mean, when I left CMD, I went back teaching in 2015, and I had a year of non-compete. So I took up a design director role at Sunbeam, and then I was doing a Monday and a Friday teaching, and I saw that the course had really flattened out, and I thought, well, there's no one really teaching the trade craft pillars of model making, visual communication, and industry level CAD, like teaching it, mentoring it, mastering it, master apprentice level teaching. So myself and 3 others started Auxiliary, which you probably aren't aware of, but haven't heard of. But it was a finishing course that we ran for 5 years, from 2015 to 2020. COVID basically put a nail in the coffin for it. But we were portfolio selection only. It was open to anyone, and it was a finishing program that we'd run and we'd open up our studios to be night classes, and we'd basically pick some small cohorts and train them in those core fundamental skills. Almost do a night studio. So when CDG would finish work at 5:30 in the afternoon, by 6 the students were in here, and my other directors would come in, and we'd run a night program. And it was run as a real consultancy. And it was really just focusing on those finishing skills, you know, industry level sketching, industry level BizCom in general, industry level CAD, and industry level model making. And it was incredibly fun. I loved it. And the students had an incredible success with it, and all got really good vocational opportunities out of it, but not very scalable. So I've tried, but in terms of scaling it, it's very hard to scale as a business model. Our friend in the US and colleague Hector has managed to scale it with advanced design and offsite, but he's basically converted to a digital program. That's something to maybe get Hector on. I don't know if you know Hector De Silva, but reach out to him and have a look at advanced design and offsite. Two amazing, especially for emerging designers that really do want to reconnect with traditional industrial design and get those skills. I think that's a great opportunity for you guys to share Hector's work over there.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, so it is a challenge, mate, and it's you know, I think I see it. We know the other thing to probably, I guess, recognize is COVID was bad in terms of isolating you guys in education, but it was also good for three or so years in that you didn't have to compete with all the international talent. So right now, every day we're getting 4 or 5 portfolios from all over the world. So when, I guess that's our other bit of advice is don't, as you know, your colleagues and emerging designers that are coming after you are setting up their portfolios and their work, don't critique the guys next to you or the girls next to you. Critique the best out of France and the best out of Germany and the best out of the US, because Australia is a very desirable place to live and work, right? So it's attracting, we can't help but attract the very best talent in terms of portfolios into our, now we may not employ them and we may not want to sponsor them or take on the visa rights or anything else, but just be aware that that's every day when I'm looking at a portfolio, I'm looking at work that's coming out of FH Joanne and Garaz Austria or Umea in Sweden, and I'm looking at that as a graduate level of perception.
Yeah.
So that's unfair because a lot of those European unis are still training at a industry-ready trade craft skill set, right? So yeah, I think that's another. Just if I was to summarize that, put into is you're looking for inspiration, you're benchmarking your skills. Don't necessarily lock it to local. Look international and peg yourselves against the very best designers that you can step up to and try and beat in terms of skill sets.
How do you see the relationship between industrial design and art, and how has that affected your design process?
Yeah, look, I enjoy making things. I'm a natural maker. I'm always building stuff, but art, I find I don't really enjoy as much as I do with design. Like if I'm on holiday, I drove my wife crazy. If we go to Fiji, I will happily, go for a swim and have a cocktail, but you'll find me opening up CAD pretty quickly and designing something completely pleasurable, something I haven't had a chance to work on, because design and life for me are just not. I love generating solutions and developing things that work. And art, sure, it's fine, but I'd much rather sketch a motorcycle. I know you're a keen motorcycle. I'd much rather sit and sketch a motorcycle than an abstract painting.
Yeah.
So for me, I appreciate art, but it's not something that I see a lot of value.
You don't think it has an interrelationship between industrial design?
Well, it's aspects of it, composition, proportion, color theory. We teach all that, obviously, and that's all part of core artistic skills for sure. But for me, I see beauty in meaning and outcome and value and things that work to do things in society, provide positivity, and passive pieces of illustration. I admire the work that's gone into them. I admire the human endeavor, but I don't. I'd much rather go to the powerhouse than the Australian National Gallery, for example.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's just me. I'm a bit weird like that probably, but you know,
Oh.
I enjoyed art at school. I enjoyed particular. Oh, so okay, that's interesting, right? Loved pottery.
Mm.
Less keen on painting,
Yeah, okay.
which is interesting, right? So you're making and manifesting a useful object, an artifact, an artistic artifact that has use, as opposed to decorative.
Mm. Well, I suppose in a way you could say that the traditional design skills almost integrate with, you know, like sculpturing, for example.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
a key technique in, you know, model making.
Absolutely. If you think about where we were before the Industrial Revolution and before the Bauhaus, we were blacksmiths and
Mm.
potters and ceramicists and wheelwrights and all those kind of things. So
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah, no, it's interesting, isn't it?
Mm.
I haven't been asked that for a while. It's interesting because in my team there's some incredible artists. You know,
Mm.
there's really fine, like self-trained but incredible artists, and they love it, and they love the meditation and the expression that comes out of it. And I get it and I appreciate it, but for me, I'd rather not spend time doing that. I'd rather spend time building something that has, I don't know, a tangible, functional performance outcome.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah,
Function over form, I suppose.
maybe. Yeah, exactly. But you know, in terms of critique, so I guess that's interesting. So art obviously teaches you to critique, and I think that's something that's missing out of modern education globally is this harsh critique, meaningful and constructive critique, and justification. You know, there's some principles there as well that I think are probably a little bit lean at the moment in education. So, you know, I think back to my time going through uni, we got critiqued harshly, and you know, if our quality of our thinking wasn't on game and how that manifested out to the quality of our product outcome, we were severely, you know, I guess we were put at a detriment. You know, I can remember work being pulled off the wall because it wasn't to standard. It wasn't to standard. That was really interesting. It wasn't to standard. So it wasn't whether it, you know, responded to the CRA. It was, is this an industry standard? Have you done everything possible to get this to where it needs to be? And if it isn't, then it's off the wall and on the floor. And you would lose a mark in a week, and you'd have to resubmit the next week. There had to be an industry standard, otherwise you would lose another mark. So it was interesting how if you didn't put the effort in, it was hard. I mean, I had guys in my year that were, you know, working full time as well as trying to fit in, you know, ridiculous contact hours. And some weeks their shifts just fell in a way that they just couldn't put the effort in, and they fell below standard.
Yeah.
So anyway, critique. So then once you were at standard and once the work was on there was this long critique that would occur as to why your design was good, how could you make it better, why is it better than another person's design, and that was across all years. And I still remember those critiques, and fourth years coming down and watching you, and you going up to fourth years and watching their critiques, and that was really interesting and interesting, you know, detailed conversation around color theory and how you've used color and the emotional connection of that color to the brand, or the emotional connection of that color to the semantics of the product, and then proportion. You know, thinking about art theory, proportion control. That's something I see a lot missing out of young portfolios at the moment, is, or emerging design portfolios, is their control and proportion is really poor. Ratios and the way light falls on a product, they're not, I don't know if it's a limitation of their CAD skill, but the work that's being rendered is not, it's not illustrating surfaces, it's not tonally controlled, it's not giving you proportion, you're not having a sense of lightness out of a product, it's blocky and heavy and crude.
Okay.
So art has, yeah, so you're right, you probably convinced me. Art has a strong role to play in those foundations around design, particularly around theory and principles. But do I wake up out of bed? Do I get out of bed and want to be an artist? Hell no.
Okay. Well, yeah. Well, thanks for coming on, Neil. It's been great to chat to you about your career as a designer, and yeah, it's been really interesting learning about your insights.
Yeah, no problem at all. Thanks again, and yeah, good luck with it all. And if I can deliver any links or you know, offer any referral services or anything like that, then yeah, to you and the guys that are emerging, let us know.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Neil.
All right. Thanks, mate.